Welcome back to the Stream of Consciousness, everyone. I'm your host, Cyrus. This is a very special fact check edition where we're going to be looking at the effectiveness of drug testing public assistance recipients as a condition of eligibility. So, this is this age old debate of if you're on welfare, should you have to take a drug test in order to be eligible? Well, that's not actually the debate because the way it works these days is that you have to be able to take a drug test, and if you fail it, they put you into some programs to make sure that you're not wasting all your money on drugs, that you're actually getting yourself together for work. So let's make sure we're at least framing the issue correctly. But at the end of the day, there's people suggesting that, if you want to get benefits from the government, you should have to take drug tests. Specifically, they're talking about TANF, this temporary assistance for needy families. This was a welfare reform bill that was passed back in the 90s that tried to make it so that welfare was more of a temporary thing instead of, you could be on it forever. Anyway, the ACLU here has a strong opinion about it. They're saying that it doesn't work. In fact, you'll find this opinion all over the news. There's article after article after article saying that this just flat out doesn't work. And frankly, their reasoning is really piss poor. So let's go through it point by point and talk about it. First off, they say welfare recipients are no more likely to use drugs than the rest of the population. According to the study, they use them the same percentage. Irrelevant, doesn't matter. We're not talking about the general population. We're talking about people who are asking for benefits from the general population. There's a tax dollars, but let's keep going. It says here, 70% of all illicit drug users ages 18 to 49 are employed full time. Ooh, I'm impressed there. So what they're trying to say is that, just the premise that drug use and employment are connected is faulty because 70% of all illicit drug users are working. So why are you even upset? Well, if 70% are employed, that means 30% are unemployed, which is really, really bad. It's like twice as bad as Spain and Greece, which have notoriously crappy economies. They're like, hey guys, don't worry. It's the unemployment rates are just twice as bad as these places that are terrible for employment. Not only that, but their definition is from 18 to 49. Traditional definitions of unemployment are typically 18 to 65. I guess if you use illegal drugs, you get to retire at 49. You get to retire early. In all seriousness, though, they've basically shaved off the least likely to be employed group, 50 to 65. So this would be even worse than 30% unemployed. It's probably closer to like 40%, Unemployment rate's 10 times larger than the general population. And they're like, hey, it's no big deal. So that's just actually like a really embarrassing point to try to make. It's not a good start for them. Anyway, let's just keep going here. They start talking about the stigma, that there's some stigma associated with testing. Don't care. Don't think the general population cares. There's stigma associated with using welfare, isn't there? I mean, I'm not saying there should be, but there shouldn't be stigma to taking a drug test, all right? I've done it. I've done it for several different companies I worked for. It's not that big of a deal. You piss in the cup, you move on with your day. But this is where it gets to the argument people are most familiar with. It says random drug testing of welfare recipients is fiscally irresponsible. The idea being that you don't save as much money as you spend on these programs. Number one, that's really dishonest framing. This is a public welfare program. You're saying that you are out of work and you need help and you're trying to get back on your feet, but at the same time, you want to continue to use illegal drugs. Like anyone, any friend or any family member that actually cared about you would tell you that that's bad, that you shouldn't do that, that there's going to be very many employers that are going to require you to take a pre-employment drug test, and you're just disqualifying yourself for all of them while at the same time holding your hand out. Just really bad juju. Like, it's just bad for you. You're in a tough spot. You should probably put the bong down for like a month or two while you get this shit together, right? I'm not trying to be disparaging or anything like that. I'm just saying that this is a kind of a ridiculous concept, that it has to be like fiscally positive or something, fiscally neutral. Show me another public welfare program where that's the case. They're spending money to make people's lives better, okay? But anyway, their definition of expensive is $42 per person tested. Oh, okay. Not including the cost of hiring personnel to administer the test, to ensure confidentiality. Okay, this is where the expensive part gets in. Government workers take that $42 test, make it $420 somehow. Anyway, I just explained why that's kind of a silly argument. At the end of the day, they said that they've spent over $1 million or a little bit over $1 million on these programs, just over $1 million. That's actually not very much. It was across like 4 states, that's not very much money. But let's get into the most ridiculous argument that they make, even more ridiculous than the one about the 30% unemployment with their own made-up definition of unemployment, but this one's also a doozy. They say here, another way to measure the cost is by counting what it costs to quote-unquote catch each drug user. No, it isn't. I'm just going to stop you right there. No, it isn't. The ACLU admits that the drug usage rates for people on welfare are generally the same as the general population, around 8 to 10%. They're no worse, they're no better, they're just like everybody else. There's plenty of different research to confirm that. Nobody's arguing with it. So if you drive that usage rate down to zero, that means that your drug testing program was extremely effective, almost 100% effective. You can't say we didn't catch very many people, therefore this program was a failure, dum-dum. The whole point of the program is to get people to stop using. So if they stop using, that's a good thing. To sit here and say another way to measure the cost is by counting what it costs to quote-unquote catch each drug user is just absolutely ridiculous framing. That's just embarrassing. The logic there is just zero, totally backwards on its head. They say here that some electronics manufacturer tested 10,000 employees and only 49 tested positive. Yeah, these aren't random drug tests, guys. Keep that in mind here. You have time to get cleaned up, all right? They're not just throwing the test in your face. So to say that only 49 tested positive, that's good. The point of the program was to get your employees off drugs. Just absolutely stupid. It goes on to say mandatory drug testing is an ineffective means to uncover drug abuse for that reason. Okay, whatever. And then it starts talking about these questionnaires. It says an Oklahoma study found that a questionnaire was able to accurately detect 94 out of 100 drug abusers. I actually found that to be kind of an interesting claim. You know, a questionnaire that's that accurate. You'd think that a drug user would just be like, nah, I don't use drugs. I don't use them. So, how would you know unless you were actually following up with some sort of chemical test? You have to have something to compare it to. So I went down the rabbit hole, probably wasted a good 20 minutes on this. It turns out you cannot really find the source for this information. You can find a million studies that cite this exact same claim, even in the exact same terminology. Go ahead, throw it into Google, check out what you see. Just study after study that makes the same claim. But if you go into their sources, it's just this big circular reference gangbang, everybody's just referencing each other. I, as a matter of fact, cannot find a single example of the questionnaire itself. And boy, did I look. I could only find examples of them analyzing the results, like showing you the output. So I was a little suspicious. If you can find an actual copy of this thing, almost all of them are coming out of this one place in Arizona run by like this one guy. So it's already kind of suspicious. It reminds me a lot of these like totally nonsensical personality tests. So I was just already super suspicious. Can't find any example of the tests. If you can find a single example, please send it to me. But, it's just kind of ridiculous because it's hard to believe such a test exists, and it's hard to test its effectiveness unless you're actually drug testing people. So, I don't know. Go ahead. Go down that rabbit hole and see what you find. You'll find it is bullshit. Test that's 94% accurate at finding drug abusers just by asking questions. Okay. One of the few things that I could actually find was that it factored in all kinds of parts of your personal history, like whether you are a confirmed drug user, whether you had a criminal history, and it asked how many months out of the last year you were employed and used that as a factor. So I think it's kind of ironic that they're trying to claim there's not a link between that employment while at the same time leaning on a survey that uses your employment history as an indicator of illegal drug use. It's just a total fucking ridiculous nonsense. Anyway, it goes down to one of the few things I do agree with, which is that random drug testing of welfare recipients is likely unconstitutional under both the U.S. Constitution and some state constitutions. As I said at the beginning, these weren't like surprise tests. They were given to you with time in advance to get cleaned up. But what they're talking about here is just even randomly doing them at all. Like they're saying that you have to have some sort of basis, some sort of suspicion before you can do this because it qualifies as some sort of search. Just the fact that they're saying it's likely unconstitutional, they're not saying it is unconstitutional. You can kind of just ignore it right out of the gate, right? They've ruled that you can drug test kids for after school sports and stuff like that. There's all kinds of different things that you can drug test people for. So I can't see how this is that different. And again, it's just one of those things where it's like, here's our opinion, take it or leave it. I'll go ahead and leave it. I'm not a lawyer. I can't really argue one way or the other. I will tell you that none of these states is doing this in terms of just random tests anymore. They're forcing you to fill out these stupid little questionnaires. And somehow, some way, if you fail on the questionnaire, then you have to take the drug test. You gotta wonder what kind of idiot is failing these things, right? But that kind of factors back into their thing of they're not catching anybody. So they've created this system where catching people is their metric of success when it shouldn't be. It should be how many people did we get clean relative to the population? What percentage of those went on to find employment or a more joyful life? And even then, it should be valued against the dollar that we spent on it. It shouldn't be like, well, if it's not net positive and we don't make money off of it, we're not doing it. It's like, what if we put that standard towards every form of welfare? We'd have to cancel 90% of them, okay? Here's the conclusion. Here's what you got to understand. If we're only spending, $100 per person or $1 million over a couple states, and that's covering tens of thousands of people, it doesn't take very many people cleaning their life up because of this program for it to be a huge benefit, okay? Like, to tell me that it's failing because we're not catching people, well, you're telling me you don't even understand the program in the first place, and I should probably stop listening to the rest of what you're saying, because you can't compare it against that. You have to compare it against the control group. Like, is this how you would study the effectiveness of some medicine? You're like, well, we gave the medicine to everybody, and then when we tested them, none of them had the disease, so I guess it doesn't work. It's like, wait, what? Shouldn't that make it does work by logic? Doesn't that mean it does work? When you give a treatment and no longer do you have the symptom, that means it worked. When 10% of the general population has the symptom and 0% of your test population does, that means your treatment worked. Doesn't mean it doesn't work, okay? Think it over, genius. Think a little bit harder. Pretty much every argument that they're making against here is either totally ludicrous or just flagrantly dishonest. They're just making up their own definitions and trying to throw them in your face as if they make any sense. Only 30% unemployment when we exclude people 50 to 65. So, what do you have to say about that? You're like, I have to say it's dog shit. It's a real problem. There's not a moral thing here. I don't give a shit whether you use drugs or not. I think if you pay your taxes, you should be able to use drugs all day. I don't give a shit. But I do give a shit if you're saying, I need some help and I need you to help me, but I'm not going to stop doing drugs because I enjoy them. I don't care that I'm unemployed, and I don't care that that disqualifies me from Target, from Home Depot, from every big box store you've ever heard of. It's like, 25-30% of the jobs you're not even going to be able to qualify for anymore. I don't care about that. I want to keep smoking pot. It's your responsibility to make sure that I can continue to do that. Just an absolutely ludicrous argument. And frankly, the people who think that they're trying to help these people by continuing to, enable them, you're not helping, okay? You're not helping. You're not the good guy. You're not on the high horse. You don't understand what's going on here. You just see somebody who's upset because they have to take a drug test and you've been told that it's big, bad, meanie conservatives or just whatever. I don't think you understand what's going on here. And so for all the writers and all the others who's making these ridiculous claims, it's just a big double middle fingers up.